Okay, let's give this a go. Now, what we're going to do is going to start to look more scary, but I want you to just listen and breathe and do not panic, because I will try and show you how to break it down the easiest way to make it the simplest. Okay, so nobody freak out. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we got properties of radicals. Now, these work the same way as when we were doing the square roots. So remember when we had two things being multiplied underneath a radical, you could split it up into two radicals with the same index. They both had square roots. Works the same way. If you have two radicals that have the same index and they're multiplying, you can just stick them underneath the same radical. So this is where it comes in. Let's say you have a problem like this. The third root of 12 times the third root of 18. Now, the first thing you do is you go and you look at your perfect square paper. Okay, so we're going to look underneath the x cubed column. Sorry. Okay, we don't see a 12 here. We also don't see, 18? We don't see an 18 here. Since we don't see either one of those numbers, we're going to combine them under one radical like this. So now you're just going to multiply 12 times 18. And we get 216. And when you go back and look at your perfect square cube thing, we see 216 right there. So the cubed root of 216 is 6. There we go. And since it's an odd index and a positive radicand, it's just going to be one positive answer. Okay. Now it's going to work the same way this way. Let's say we've got them both underneath their radical, and we want to split them up. So I'm going to split it into the square root of 9 and the square root of x. Now we know what the square root of 9 is. That's 3. The square root of x can't be simplified. So there we have our answer. Okay, now if you have a fraction under a radical, it can either be split up into two radicals, or you can divide them. Or if you have them split, you can put them together. Okay, so let's say that we have the fourth root of 80 over the fourth root of 5. First thing you do is go and look at your fourth root paper. Here we see 81, not 80, and we definitely don't see 5. So we're going to see, can we do 80 divided by 5? Okay, so we're going to put them together underneath the radical, and now we're going to divide 80 by 5, and we get 16. Go back to your fourth root, we see 16, so the answer is 2. Now, when they're asking you to simplify these expressions, if it comes out to a whole number like it's on your list, then you'll just use that number. If it does not come out to a whole number, you're not going to use a fraction, you just leave it, okay? And for these purposes, when we have an even index, we're not going to have a plus or minus 2. We're only going to use the positive 2. It goes back to when we were doing square roots. And when I asked you to simplify, we just used the positives. And then when you had to do SADMAP, that's when the plus or minus came in. So it's going to be the same thing here. Okay, now we look at this one. We've got 16 over 81. If you divide 16 by 81, you get some weird fraction. So we're going to split it up into two radicals, if it clicks. Okay. Now you're going to go to your fourth list. So fourth root of 16. Look at that. It's on there. That's 2. And then the other number was fourth root of 81. So fourth root of 81 is 3. So the top becomes 2. The bottom becomes 3. You're done. Okay. Now, let's say we have the fifth root of 7 over the fifth root of 8. Okay, when we look at our fifth root column here, the smallest number is 32. So 7 and 8 aren't on there. If we put them together into one fraction and do 7 over 8, you get a decimal. So what we have to do is we have to rationalize the denominator. Remember that? Okay, now what this is going to be is we're going to look at my fifth root column. The bottom here is an 8. I need to turn the 8 into the smallest number on this x to the 5th list I can. So the smallest one is 32. You multiply 8 by 4 to get 32, right? Now, because it's 5th root, it has to be the 5th root of 4, so that I get the 5th root of 32. And whatever I do on the bottom of this fraction, I have to also do on the top of the fraction. Okay, so I'm multiplying my bottom by the 5th root of 4, multiplying the top by the same thing. Now all you're going to do is multiply these. They have the same root. So 7 times 4 is 28, and 8 times 4 is 32. Now I like this because the 5th root of 32 is on my list, and the 5th root of 32 is 2. So now my bottom is a whole number. It doesn't have a radical in it. Okay, let's look at the 6th root of 2 over 81. It's the same kind of situation. You can't do 2 divided by 81, so we're going to split it up. Now we're going to go to our 6th column. So x to the 6th, we're looking for 81. We see 64 and 729, so no 81. However, we're going to figure out, can we multiply 81 by something to make it 729? And if you do 729 divided by 81 in your calculator, you get 9. So we're going to multiply the bottom by the 6th root of 9. They have to have the same index. And whatever I did on the bottom, I do on the top. So now I multiply. 2 times 9 is 18. 81 times 9 is 729. And remember that 6th root of 729 is what I wanted because it's on my list. And the 6th root of 729 is 3. So my bottom becomes 3. Whoops. And 18 isn't on my x to the 6th, so the top is done. Let's try another one like that. Okay, 3rd root of 16x over 54x squared. All right, can't do 16 divided by 54, so we're going to split it up. Okay, now we're going to look for the 3rd root of 16. Okay, we have 8 and 27, 16 is not on there. Now we're going to look for the 3rd root of 54. 54 is not on here. Okay, can I multiply 54 by something to make it 20 or 64? No. Can I multiply 54 by something to make it 125? No. I can multiply 54 times something to get 216. And I'm going to multiply that by 4. So 54 times 4 gives me the 216 on my list. Now my x squared, that can't be in under the radical either. The power of the x squared has to be a multiple of 3 so it can be divided. So if I take x squared and multiply it by x, I get x cubed. That's where this x is coming from. And so what I've done on the bottom, I'm doing on the top. So I'm just going to multiply across. 16 times 4 is 64. X times x is x squared. 54 times 4 is 216. X squared times x is x cubed. Okay, so now we go back to our cubed root. On the top, we have that 64. Notice that the cubed root of 64 is 4. So on the top, this is going to become 4. 2 is not a multiple of 3, so it's going to stay. Here, my 3rd root of 216, that's what I was going for. My 3rd root of 216 is 6. And when I've got an x cubed and the cubed root, those cancel out. So the cubed root of 64 is 4. Keep the cubed root of x squared. Cubed root of 216 became 6. And this 3 and this 3 cancel out, so I have x. Now I can't do anything with the x's, so I have to look at the 4 over 6. And can I simplify that? Do they have a common denominator or a common factor? And they do, it's 2. So that becomes 2/3. And keep the 3rd root of x squared and x. Okay, now that's a little more complicated, but it's not too hard. Okay, when we get to the next one, this is where it starts to really look scary. And some of you are going to complain, and you're going to be very upset by the amount of work that goes into this. However, it's another one of those cases that the more you write down, the easier it is. Okay, and this is something kind of difficult to teach. So the more we break it down, the easier it is for you to follow. Okay, so when we have an expression like this, first thing we're going to do is we're going to break it up. We're going to keep the whole number by itself. We're going to keep A's by themselves, B's by themselves, and C's by themselves. So it's going to get broken down like this. Okay, do not put a 4 and an A underneath the same thing. Do not put an A and a B under the same thing. Each number, each letter gets separated. Now, if you had 45 in front of this, then you would have 45 under here. Don't try to separate it into the 5th root of 4 and the 5th root of 5. Okay, now what we're going to do is we have like 4 separate little problems that we're going to work on. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take each one of these and we're going to rewrite them with their fractional exponents. Okay, so the 4th root of 5 is 4 to the 1/5. 8, or A to the 8th power, the 5th root is this. Okay, now, what we're going to do is if the denominator is bigger than the numerator, then you're just going to leave it and you're going to put it back into the radical form. Okay, so if the top number is smaller, you're just going to keep it and put it back into radical form. Now, when the numerator is larger, what you're going to do is you're actually going to divide this, and we want the fraction, we want the mixed number. So 8 divided by 5 becomes 1 3/5. All I did is take 8 divided by 5, and I got 1 3/5. So you're going to need to use that fraction button on your calculators. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to split it up. So I'm going to take the A and keep a whole number with it. And then I'm going to take another A and keep the fraction part with it like this. Now, this is not going to have a radical with it because it's got a whole number next to it. It's got 1. This now, the numerator is smaller than the bottom. So just like I did here, I'm going to turn that back into the radical. So my A stays out front, and my A to the 3/5 became A cubed to the 5th. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with B to the 14 over 5. So 14 over 5 is 2 4/5. I'm going to have a B with the squared and a B with the fraction part. B squared is a whole number, that stays. We're good. This, the numerator, is smaller than the denominator, so turn that back into a radical. Okay, now, C to the 5 over 5. 5 over 5 is 1, so that's just C. So I've got each part simplified. This stayed, this became this became this, and this became this. So now what I have to do is put them all back together. So I'm going to start with the things that are outside the radical. Okay? This is under a radical, so I don't care to count that. This A out front is not under the radical. The B squared is not under a radical, and the C. So in my answer, I'm going to start by writing down the A, B squared, C. Now I have to put together the things that are under the radical. And you always start with the number, the actual number first, and then the letters go in alphabetical order. So I'm going to have the 5th root of 4, A cubed, B to the 4th. Come on. So this is what your final answer looks like. Okay, I'll let that sink in for a minute. I know it looks scary, but but you can do this, okay? We're going to try another one, walking through it again, just the same way. Okay, this one now is division. So it's going to take a little bit more, okay? We're going to split it up so that we have our numbers over numbers, my x's over x's, and my y's over y's, which means that the first thing we're going to have to do is rewrite them in the rational form. So I've got 6 over 4. I've got a whole x here. And remember that the square root of x is x to the 1/2. Then up here, I've got my y to the 3/4. And on the bottom, the square root of y is y to the 1/2. Now, 6 over 4, I'm going to simplify that. Common factor, so that becomes 3 over 2. Remember, when you're dividing the same base, you subtract the exponent. So I have 1 minus 1/2 is 1/2. So this becomes x to the 1/2. Okay, subtract these. So I've got 3/4 minus 1/2. Before I can subtract them, I have to have common denominators. So I'm going to turn my 1/2 into 2/4. Now 3/4 minus 2/4 is 1/4. Okay, now the only thing is this is a 2 on the bottom, this is a 4 on the bottom. We need them to have the same number on the bottom because that's going to become our index. So I'm going to change the 1/2 into 2/4. Okay, 3/2 is done. That's simplified. My x to the 2/4, my numerator is smaller than the denominator, so I'm just going to turn that back into a radical. Same thing with my y. My numerator is smaller than my denominator, so I turn it back into a radical. Now, because they have the same index, I can combine them together underneath the same radical. Okay, now, when you have this, you have to be careful of what's on top, what's not on top. Okay, things that are on top are going to stay on top, things on the bottom are going to stay on the bottom. So when you do 3/2, you're still going to have 3 over 2 here. Now, the question is the 4th root of x squared on the top or on the bottom? If I had to take this and rewrite it as a fraction, it would be the 4th root of x squared over 1. So that means it's on the top. This would be the 4th root of y over 1. That means this is on the top. So on the top of this fraction, I'm going to have 3 4th root of x squared y. And on the bottom, I'm just going to have the 2. So this is what my answer is going to look like. Okay. Now this one doesn't have any numbers. It just has variables. So what we want to do is, you can't do x divided by y because they're 2 different letters, right? So we're going to start by splitting it up. And this has more to do with like rationalizing the denominator, like what we did before. So we need the power on y to be a multiple of 3. So the next number up from 8 that can be divided by 3 is 9. To turn the y to the 8th into y to the 9th, I have to multiply it by a y. And what you multiply on the bottom, you have to multiply on the top. Okay, so now remember, we just multiply. Since they're both the 3rd root, combine them underneath a radical. And on the bottom, y to the 8th times y is y to the 9th. Now, 9, this becomes y to the 9 over 3. 9 divided by 3 is 3. Yeah, wow, I almost said 2. Okay, so my bottom becomes y to the 3rd. And then you're done with that one. Okay, I think that is it for the notes. Okay, so you're going to do the next assignment, assignment 14. Assignment 15 will be the same kind of thing. So 14 is to practice it, make sure you know what you're doing. And 15 is to give you a little more practice. And then when we get to assignment 16, it'll be another skill. Okay, so take your time, make sure that you go back and rewatch the video as much as you need to. Go back and look at the actual notes without the video. And have your perfect squares and more paper with you. Good luck. As always, message me if you need to. Let me know what's going on. Hope you're all safe and healthy. We're almost done, guys. Just a couple more weeks. All right, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.